There's so much information available on the internet that sometimes it can be hard for people to interpret everything that they get. I'm a firm believer in spending all the time that's necessary in order for patients and their families to fully understand what's going on to make a good decision.
Hi, I'm Max Brantley with the Arkansas Times on Thursday, January 25th. Let's talk legal news again today and whether you can sue the state of Arkansas and its courts. The state Supreme Court today issued a small, what they call per curiam opinion, a one-page unsigned opinion on a small matter. They refused to rehear a case in which they'd ordered the payment of court costs in a lawsuit over the illegal spending of state surplus money, the so-called General Improvement Fund. The state argued they shouldn't have to pay court costs in this case because of the doctrine of sovereign immunity, the notion that the state cannot be sued. The people who were seeking the court costs said that that sovereign immunity provision is overridden by another part of the Constitution that explicitly allows lawsuits over illegal exactions, that is, illegal spending of tax money. The Supreme Court seems to have bought that argument, although the opinion doesn't say exactly why they upheld this decision. It was 4-3, so there was a difference of opinion. But perhaps some part of the ability to sue the state for illegal spending of tax money may still exist. There are a lot more developments to come in this case, including the constitutional amendment campaign to make it clear the legislature can choose circumstances where the state can be sued by people who've suffered at its hands. Last night, members of the University of Arkansas Board of Trustees met with UAMS officials to talk about the medical center's budget problems. It was decided there are going to be monthly meetings between the board and UAMS to talk about how things are going at cutting costs and meeting the budget. This could mean future layoffs. Most people think there will be. The UAMS is still resisting our FOI efforts to say who exactly lost jobs, how many, what the positions were, what the pay were, how many were women, how many were men, how many black, white, how many were older people, younger people, what types of people lost jobs. They've been very secretive about this. The sad news is that the University of Arkansas Board of Trustees made it clear that the state has not been willing to provide additional support for the Med Center and doesn't seem likely to in the years ahead. This fits in with our story yesterday that the governor's budget making seems to be designed to preserve money for more tax cuts, not for more government services. Elsewhere today in Slate, influential publication that comes out of Washington, William Salatin wrote a blistering piece about U.S. Senator Tom Cotton, said he's a liar repeatedly, offered a number of examples of that, particularly in his defense of Donald Trump on almost everything, no matter how dishonest he may appear in doing so. The point of the piece was, as bad as he is as a senator, he'd be worse as CIA director. Couldn't agree more. His friends in the press, who are sometimes granted interviews with him here in Arkansas, say he showed a sign of compromise yesterday on immigration. That's not true. He said the same things he's always said. As Donald Trump said yesterday, they really want to help the dreamers, that is, the people who came to the U.S. as children and have never known any other country. But they've got a lot of conditions to put on that, and whatever legislation emerges, and it won't be good for immigrants, you can be sure. Interesting story developed by KRK last night, and that is that the Jeff Sessions Department of Justice is reviewing potential so-called reverse discrimination. That is, that a white officer was discriminated against when a black officer got a job on a hit-and-run investigation squad. He says he was passed over for somebody who had less experience. The person who made the pick, a black officer, said the man she picked made a better presentation. However, she was quoted as saying she was tired of seeing lily white squads in the police department. This has a racial note. The EEOC found reason that sounded like a discriminatory view. Of course, it's exactly true that white people have dominated too many parts of the police department for too many years, but you got to be careful about how you say these things. Problem for the Justice Department, which Jeff Sessions is turning away from the Barack Obama era movement to try and do something about racial discrimination by police departments. If it is now looking to defend white cops rather than defend black people who've been beaten on the streets, is that this officer they're defending is Ralph Brashears. He was charged last week with misdemeanor battery, partially for not telling the truth about use of deadly force in an incident he was involved in. He was fired once previously in his career for not telling the truth about an incident in which he had a dispute with a person that he'd tried to arrest. Not a great guy to defend when you're talking about best qualified for a job choice. Attorney General Leslie Rutledge announced yesterday afternoon that she was going to hire lawyers to look into whether there could be a lawsuit against opioid manufacturers. We're one of the worst abusing states in the country, and certainly there's some money to be made there, and she'd like to get some money that she could spend out of her little slush fund that the Attorney General accumulates from some such lawsuits. It might be better if we looked a little bit at the cause of opioid abuse and not only getting some money out of the drug companies, but trying to address why people get addicted to them and to stop that from happening. Here's one for animal lovers and elephant lovers particularly, which I happen to be. I got a letter today from animal rights activist Ruth Scroggin of Jonesboro, who objected to finding out that the State National Guard had rented 4 of its armories for a small circus that includes elephant animals in it as part of its entertainment. It's an outfit that's had some problems with USDA regulation, including a wreck on or at least a trailer breakdown on a highway in Oklahoma yesterday. In any event, she didn't think armories should be used for this purpose and wrote to object. Whether it was a good operator or not, she doesn't think elephants should be used for entertainment. The circus itself said they treat animals well and said that these animal rights activists are just a bunch of vegans and don't believe in using animals for entertainment. Well, there was a development in this story. Her letter was heard. The National Guard now tells me that these armories were rented by local operators who didn't know there was a policy against renting the armories for livestock-related shows. They're not a good use of the armory for community purposes, and so those shows will be canceled, with the exception of one tonight, I believe, in Forest City, where the preparations were too far along to stop, but 3 other shows will be canceled. They won't be held in the National Guard Armory. So a person who wrote a letter has been heard. Good lesson there for all of us. And finally, this note from the art world. The Washington Post reported today that Donald Trump's White House wanted the Guggenheim Museum in New York to lend them a Van Gogh painting to display in the White House. Apparently they liked the looks of it, a man walking in the snow in France. The curator up there said no, they couldn't possibly loan him a Van Gogh, but they did have something from an exhibit on America that included some pieces that exhibited the excess of wealth in America and its ill effects. It would be an 18-karat gold toilet that they said they'd be happy to install in the White House and demonstrate for Donald Trump how it could be used. That's a commentary of a sort, I suppose. I'm guessing that he won't be sending any money from the Trump Foundation to the Guggenheim Museum anytime soon. They're resisting. Me too. I'll be back tomorrow.